First of all, I was here in April, and it's a real honor to be invited back here. The people who attend this conference are doing such great work, so if I can in some small way offer something that is useful to one of you, I feel like a mission accomplished. I have a couple caveats, a couple asterisks. One would be, it may seem that my topic won't be applicable to you, but maybe if you're creative enough, you will see potential applicability for you, your organization, for your next great startup, or for somebody you know. The other one is that I will necessarily need to speak in some broad brushstrokes, so don't take me to task on too many of the details, but I think that we'll be able to cover some major points, and again, which I hope will be useful for you or one of your organizations. And I'm going to start from the broad, and then as I move along, get more and more specific down to the experiences and the lessons learned by equal exchange. So some of this also reflects my own path to social entrepreneurship. And one thing that I think is helpful is to ask the question about, if we're trying to do good, well, what are the big powers, the big forces that shape society? You're probably not going to say sports. It may be government or something else that we'll talk about. And after you've decided for yourself what you think is some of the most powerful forces and which ones you may have a talent for, that could influence where you decide to work and how you work. So would you think that government is maybe one of the most powerful forces? Or Wall Street? Certainly that is something much talked about, and I'll actually be talking about it a little bit later. Corporations. Certainly when I was preparing for my career, this was a predominant message over and over and over again, that really corporations are running the world. Is it the media? The realm of ideas? Is it the citizen? I would like to think that maybe the citizen is one of the most powerful forces, but I'm going to suggest that maybe the market is one of the most powerful forces. And certainly for my own lived experience and for Equal Exchange's story, the power of the market is critical. So going from there, I want to jump back to 1994 when I was nearing the end of my undergraduate degree. I was studying international development economics, and I had about another year to go, and I was trying to figure out where I should apply my energies. And that's obviously a huge decision to make. What am I going to be doing for the next 40 or 50 years? And it seemed to me that there was three basic options for somebody like myself, or maybe for anybody who was about to embark on a career. I could pick one of these three circles. And in my own family's experience, we had very little to do with business. A lot of people in my family had worked in the government, even in politics, and certainly in the nonprofit sector. I had no particular attraction to business myself. But again, as I was studying, there was this constant refrain that the red circle is causing a lot of problems for the blue circle and the yellow circle. And that what was done by businesses was shaping the world, basically creating a mess. And one part of that analysis was that when you actually looked at the total money that flows through one of these three circles, or the total number of people employed by these sectors, the world looked more like this. You could just break out budgets or sales revenue, and you get some numbers like this. Obviously, the for-profit world, the red circle, is much larger than the nonprofit world. And another part of there's this dynamic, again, that I was being exposed to as I studied international development, was that so many of the problems that we were grappling with were coming out of the business world. that the big, powerful business world, again, Wall Street, corporations, that they were making this mess. That they were sort of plowing ahead, doing their thing, and then leaving behind them, devastated forests, polluted seas, exploited workers, and so on. And that the nonprofits and the government were coming up behind, constantly trying to clean up the messes that they made. Or that they were trying to create rules and regulations, laws to do damage control, to minimize the damage done by businesses. And upon closer inspection, you could argue that the red section was even bigger. A lot of the money that goes through government is just passed right back through entitlements, social security payments, what have you, right back to consumers who spend it in the marketplace. So further sort of expanding the power of the market, minimizing the potential role for government. And again, this is for somebody like myself who was trying to decide, well, where should I apply myself? And another issue was that I knew that in the nonprofit sector, too often it was beholden to either government or to the private sector for, or I should say, the market for its source of money. And therefore, that was a constraint on what it could do. Also, if thinking about government as a potential place to make a difference, was it just seemed the government was too slow, too reactionary, as opposed to being proactive, and that too often it was politically constrained, that it could only take these sort of small half steps when things were really, really safe. They couldn't do bold, innovative stuff. And then also, for better or for worse, it seemed that not just the sheer power, but a lot of the dynamism in society was in the marketplace. Innovation, of course, not just technological, but innovations of forms and ideas. So now I want to switch gears again, getting to something more specific, the story of equal exchange. And not only because of some really interesting choices the founders of Equal Exchange made, but because of how the Equal Exchange story eventually became my story. It was 18 years ago that I was lucky enough to get my foot in the door at what was then this very small company. So let me quickly tell that story and try to make this point about why, and it may seem counterintuitive to some, a for-profit model in certain circumstances might be a way to maximize impact. And then secondly, my second point about using the market also to maximize one's impact. So I think I missed the slide. Well, there was a picture of the three founders, Jonathan Rosenthal, Rink Dickinson, and Michael Rosine. I want to be sure that they get the credit they deserve. And when they were getting together, brainstorming this new business, they were asking this very question about for-profit or non-profit. And now one thing that they didn't have, which you all and others have now, are resources like the Criterion Institute. They put on something called Structure Lab periodically during the year, and it's a great way for entrepreneurs to think through what kind of model could be best for them. For-profit, non-profit, B Corp, or something else. So I encourage you to check that out. Now, when they were thinking this through, I have in very small print here some of my notes. They're asking this question, well, what would be some of the benefits of being a nonprofit? I think we're familiar with those, but I want to tell you how they saw it. Obviously, if they were nonprofit, they wouldn't pay taxes. They could solicit donations. Also, their donors would get tax breaks. And if what they were trying to do, which I still have to tell you, if they were trying to do didn't quite add up, if it wasn't actually financially profitable, donations and grants could help bridge the gap so that they could keep operating. So I should go ahead and tell you more about that business in case you're unfamiliar with Equal Exchange. So this is 1986, and the three founders had seen that one of the problems that was being spewed out by that red circle, by the marketplace, was how the market was consistently, chronically, century after century, squeezing small farmers. And that means poverty. And in the global south, I think still a large majority of people, they're reliant on agriculture, but the way the market was working wasn't working for them. It would work for people who had more power, but again, not for small-scale farmers. Leads to poverty, and as we all know, so many problems certainly are exacerbated by poverty. The market also left farmers isolated, disempowered, without information, and so on. And so the founders of Equal Exchange wanted to run with this new idea which was just coming about called fair trade. Now, interestingly, many of the pioneers, both in Europe and North America, pioneers of fair trade, were nonprofits. And it would have been like 10,000 Villages. They actually have a store right around the corner. They were an inspiration to the founders of Equal Exchange. They're a nonprofit. Now, so that would have been a pretty logical thing for the founders, a model for the founders to embrace. But let me tell you more about about their internal debate. Now, one issue potentially with being a nonprofit would be, imagine you're trying to go save tigers. And when you do, and other people see that you're saving tigers, they might go, oh, okay, well, somebody's already working on that. They're already sucking up all the tiger money. I'm going to go save lions or rhinos or something. And you can imagine how this might play out in your own situation. That by doing something, you may actually lessen other people's interest to get in there and do it. If for no other reason, you're going to be competing for that same pool of grant money, for example. And another issue would be they had always wanted to be able to use this business that they created, this enterprise, as a soapbox. And they thought, okay, people are doing fair trade crafts. We can be the first in the United States to do fair trade coffee. But if we, let's say it actually works and we compare bills, et cetera. If we then go to the industry and try to promote this idea, they can say, well, you're a nonprofit. And, we, Folgers, Maxwell House, whomever, we can just dismiss what you're doing because you're a fish and we're a fowl. So maybe less sort of traction when you try to tell your story. Now, conversely, and this is maybe one of the most powerful things about Equal Exchange, was that they wanted to demonstrate this model. That they just didn't accept the idea that business had to be dog eat dog. It seemed to them that you could apply the golden rule, create a humane business, and they wanted to show that it was possible. Also, there are opportunities that come if you're actually, you're in the business. Like, we now sell chocolate. A lot of you were just enjoying some of our chocolate. A chronic problem in the last decade has been forced child labor, especially in West Africa, around cocoa production. And we've been able to use our presence as a for-profit chocolate company to say, hey, wait a minute, you don't need to do that. You can source more carefully, you can source on a fair trade basis. And the refrain from the industry, certainly 10 years ago, was like, gee, we had no idea, and it's really hard to fix. So, we're trying. And we could say, no, you're not really trying. And we know you're not because we know this business, and you can't sort of pull the wool over our eyes. So being an insider creates certain opportunities. And there was, like I was saying, they wanted to set an example. And so this today, well, 25 years ago, it all started with a single kind of coffee from Nicaragua. Today, this is part of our product line. We actually have over 100 different products. I hope one day you all get to try all of them. So this is our toolkit to make a difference. And if you're not familiar, fair trade is a voluntary set of business practices where we work directly with small farmer cooperatives, helping to empower those small farmers to run this business in their community, to gain certainly higher incomes, but more stable incomes, and also all the resources that come from owning and running a big business in their community. For now, let's just take it as a given that fair trade generates impact. So it's particularly the goals for Equal Exchange, to trade with these farmers. Also, we were trying to change business within the US by creating a democratic worker cooperative. And then also, remember we made that reference to Wall Street. Because it wasn't enough to pioneer fair trade and to get that idea out there, we also wanted to change the rules around capital and investments. And we wanted to, the three founders, wanted to prove the model. So how has it gone? Whoop, whoop, whoop. very important. Okay, so sales up to the right, kind of a slow start, and now we're over $50 million handling all kinds of products. We've created this large, by some measures, a large enterprise. This is a staff photo from 2009. Now we're well over 140 people working coast to coast. We have offices in 4 states, and over 100 of us are actually worker owners in the cooperative. We proved it's profitable. So here are our profits. It may look more impressive than it is. We've averaged profitability of about 2 or 3%. So it's still, 97, 98 cents out of every dollar of revenue is going back into cost, going back to banana farmers, coffee farmers, what have you. But we're demonstrating that this can be done. And something I hadn't said was, when this whole thing was starting in the early, mid-'80s, the response from the coffee industry was, when the founders talked about all this poverty and the disempowerment and how the market didn't work for farmers, the response was, that's not a problem. That's just a reality. That's how it is. Get used to it. 2, your idea won't work. You can't pay these higher prices. You can't work with farmer co-ops. They're not ready for the market. And 3, nobody wants what you're selling. People don't care about where their coffee comes from. So fast forward to today, well, certainly we've shown it could be done. Through our sales, certainly we found customers who care about this stuff. And in a second, I'm going to get to maybe people either that did care or they could be made to care once they were told the story. By the way, regarding the capital model, that blue line, that's the return of an investment in equal exchange versus the S&P 500 over a 10-year span. And so more recently, the stock market has begun to catch up, and I'm frankly kind of impressed that S&P was able to do that and keep up with the juggernaut of equal exchange. But the idea is that this actually can work for everybody. We can pay a modest 5% dividend, create good worker-controlled jobs, pay good prices to farmers. Everybody comes out happy without all the shenanigans of Wall Street and big business. Now, this is an example of just some of the media coverage that we've gotten over the years. And we've been written up by the Associated Press, New York Times. So we're getting this idea out there, which is going to fit into the leverage story. But also, we're talking all the time at business schools, at the Harvard Business School, MIT, Cornell, Columbia Business School. Been written up by business magazines, won awards from Fast Company magazine, the Financial Times. We're now in hundreds of thousands of textbooks. We are literally a textbook example of how business can be different. So we're proving the model. Okay, so what about leveraging the market? So there is this idea that the market is not just something you have to deal with. Well, so we have to deal with the market, we work within the market, but what if you can actually leverage it in a jujitsu kind of fashion such that not only you're doing good, but you can encourage other people to do good? And out of respect to the other speakers, I'm going to go really fast. So, all right, trying to import fair trade coffee. This is how much we were importing over the first 14 years. So it's going up. But actually, even that big spike at the end was less than 0.1% of the coffee imported into the United States. So still not making a big impact. Those early years don't even show up when you pull back a little bit and look at a 20-year span. But then something happens. What happens here? And this is what happened. A certification system got started at around that juncture, such that conventional businesses can do what we were doing, put that seal on their product, and get that sort of fair trade glow. Now, we were actually stealing market share from a small roaster in Madison, Wisconsin, and they had to respond by launching their fair trade coffee, the first to use that seal. And we know that they did it in response to us because their first name was called it's called Fair Exchange. And we told them to change the name. Now later, because this idea caught traction and there was pressure building, Starbucks was bullied by activists to start buying fair trade coffee. And then later, Green Mountain Coffee, really because some of them saw that it was the right thing to do, they got on board. And so later, basically, momentum began to build. And there was a sense that, okay, you got to do something. You can't just leave the farmers to the force of, to the ways of the market. People like Dunkin' Donuts got on board. The espresso they serve is fair trade coffee. Green Mountain convinced McDonald's to serve fair trade coffee here in New England. Whole Foods, very belatedly, kind of reluctantly, got on board. And now even Walmart is selling fair trade coffee. I won't go into all of it now. But the point being is that 27 years later, now people are scrambling all over themselves. Like, well, of course we're fair to farmers, and we're actually more fair than they are, and we build wells, and we pay these prices. It's a very exciting change of events. And some people are more sincere about it than others, but nothing else, the conversation has changed, and people know that they have to do more. So now, that marketplace, instead of being a race to the bottom, has become sort of a race upwards about who is doing more right by small-scale farmers. So I hope that some of you can find some way to replicate that in your line of work, where not only you do good, but you can use the marketplace to encourage other people to up their game. Thank you.